All right, dive it in today, folks, to something I know a lot of us wrestle with, and that's parent-teacher communication when it comes to academics.
Hmm.
Like how to really make those conversations about grades, tests, you know, all the assessments really productive.
Yeah,
Because let's be real, sometimes even we as educators can feel a little overwhelmed trying to make sense of it all, right?
absolutely.
So how do we make it clearer and actually build stronger connections between
Yes.
school and home?
Right.
Well, that's what we're digging into today.
Great.
And our guide for this deep dive is the amazing work of special education teacher, Miss Kirby.
Oh, wow. Texas.
Oh, and this is someone who knows her stuff.
Yeah.
Talk about experience. She's got master's degrees, not one, but two, in management and human resources development, a bachelor's in theater arts.
Wow. What a range.
I know, right? Like, talk about a diverse skill set.
Yeah.
And she's certified in, get this, EC6 general education, EC12 special education, and gifted and talented EC12.
Wow.
So she's really seen this from all angles.
Absolutely. She's got the experience.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So what we're doing today is really trying to unpack her insights and pull out those actionable steps.
Okay.
The stuff you can actually use to make those conversations about a student's learning journey positive and truly helpful.
Sounds good.
All right, so first things first, like, how do we even begin to set the stage for these conversations, right?
Right.
Because they can be kind of intimidating
Yeah.
for parents and for teachers.
Yeah, definitely. It can be a nerve-wracking experience for parents sometimes
Exactly.
coming into the school
Yeah.
to talk about their child's academics.
So how do we make it feel more like a genuine partnership?
Well, I think, one of the things that Miss Kirby talks about that I find really fascinating is the idea of really being intentional about creating a welcoming first impression.
Yeah.
And she actually uses this phrase, a light party atmosphere for events like open house.
A like party. Interesting.
Yeah, and, it's not about like flashing lights and loud music,
Okay.
but it's more about really thinking about the sensory details
Okay.
that can really immediately shift the tone.
Gotcha.
So imagine walking into a classroom and you see each student's desk clearly labeled, maybe even with a little personal touch. Student design journals or notebooks open, showcasing their work in a tangible way.
I like that.
And maybe alongside that, you see a student written letter, like reflecting on what they've been learning.
Oh, that's nice.
And then even small touches like having some light snacks, just think simple like trail mix or popcorn.
Yeah.
And maybe having like a looping video playing softly in the background with like essential class communication details,
Right.
like your email address or, how to connect via Class Dojo.
Yeah.
And, maybe set to some calming background music.
Wow, I love that imagery. I mean, it definitely paints a picture that feels a lot more approachable
Yes.
than, that sometimes kind of sterile environment
Right.
of a typical school open house.
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah. It's about softening those edges.
Okay, so it's more than just like the nice aesthetics.
Right,
Right.
right.
Like, what's the underlying psychology at play here? Why is this light party concept so effective?
Well, I think if you think about it from the parent's perspective, like walking into a school can sometimes kind of trigger past anxieties
Oh, yeah.
or feel very formal.
Yeah, definitely.
And so by introducing those welcoming sensory details, I think you're kind of subconsciously signaling
Yeah.
that, hey, this is a collaborative
Yeah.
and supportive space.
Right.
And, the labeled desks and the student work on display, it immediately personalizes the environment
Yes.
and gives parents that tangible connection to their child's day.
Right.
So it's really about creating that sense of like psychological safety
I see.
right from the start so that parents feel more at ease
Right.
and therefore more receptive to the information that you're going to be sharing.
Yeah, that makes total sense. It's about lowering that initial barrier.
Right. Setting a positive tone. Now, one of the examples you mentioned, those student-written letters about their learning,
Yes,
that sounds really powerful, like a way to give parents insight.
absolutely. And it ties directly into this idea of student-led engagement.
Okay.
So Ms. Kirby also emphasizes the power of student-led classroom tours.
Oh, interesting.
So, instead of you, the teacher, having to explain every aspect of the classroom,
Right.
imagine your students walking their parents through their workspace, you know, proudly showing off a project they're working on
Yeah.
or a piece of work they're particularly proud of.
Right.
They can point out key areas of the classroom like the reading corner or the science center and explain the daily routines that they follow.
Oh, wow. So it really shifts the dynamic completely,
It
right?
does, yeah.
Because instead of you presenting to the parents, the child is actually involved in showcasing their learning environment.
Exactly.
So what's the benefit there?
Well, what I find really fascinating about this is the level of ownership. Okay.
And understanding it fosters. So when students are able to articulate their learning, their routines, it reinforces their own understanding.
Right.
And then for parents, seeing their child in their learning environment, being guided by their child's perspective, it provides just invaluable firsthand context
Yeah.
for the effort and the habits that their child is developing in the classroom.
Yeah.
So it's one thing for you to say, your student is engaged in reading.
Right.
It's another for a parent to actually see their child enthusiastically show them their favorite books in the classroom library
Yeah.
and explain why
Yeah.
they enjoy those books.
Right. Right.
So, and this approach, this student-led approach, it also subtly communicates your trust in your students
Yes.
and empowers them to take responsibility for their learning.
Oh, that's really insightful.
Yeah.
So, okay, let's shift gears a little bit to kind of the more direct academic conversations.
Okay.
When you're sitting down with parents and you're talking about grades, test scores, progress, where do you even begin to make those discussions really meaningful?
Well, I think preparation is absolutely crucial here.
Okay.
Miss Kirby really stresses that you should have printed reports readily available.
Okay.
So that includes the latest report card.
Right.
Progress reports that clearly highlight both the students' strengths,
Okay.
what they're doing well, and areas where they might need more support.
Right.
And presented in clear, jargon-free language.
Gotcha.
If applicable, have standardized test scores on hand, along with a brief explanation of what those scores mean,
Right.
in the broader context of like district or state benchmarks.
Right.
It's also vital to have information about upcoming assessments
Yeah.
and the testing schedule so parents know what to expect,
Right.
as well as a clear and concise explanation of your grading scale.
Yeah.
And what the different grades represent in terms of learning mastery.
So it's about being organized, having all the necessary documents.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But then also being able to translate that information into something that parents can easily digest.
Yes, definitely.
Now, what about just those initial logistical steps? When parents arrive for these conversations, how can we make that process a little smoother?
Well, a simple yet effective tool is a well-designed parent sign-in sheet.
Okay.
But go beyond just name and signature.
Okay.
Include a space for updated email and phone contact information because, it's surprising how often this changes.
Yeah, absolutely.
And even better, offer a space for parents to indicate their preferred method of communication.
Oh, that's good.
Do they prefer a text message for quick updates, communication through Class Dojo, a phone call, or an email?
Yeah.
So, by proactively asking for this information, you're showing that you respect their time and their communication style.
Yeah.
Right from the start.
I love that proactive approach. And it seems so simple, but it can really set the tone.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, let's talk about the actual language we use when we're discussing assessments. How can we as educators make sure that we're being clear?
Right.
And that we're being helpful and not creating more confusion or anxiety?
I think this is where consciously avoiding educational jargon is paramount. Stick to plain language that everyone can understand.
Right.
And what I find fascinating here is this emphasis on shifting the focus.
Okay.
From solely the numerical scores to the student's individual learning journey and progress over time.
I like that.
So instead of primarily comparing a student to their peers, the conversation should really center on their growth.
Yes.
Relative to their own past performance.
Okay.
And their mastery of specific skills.
Yeah.
So, have they shown improvement in a particular area?
Right.
Where have they demonstrated significant understanding?
Gotcha.
And it's also incredibly helpful to briefly explain the purpose of different types of assessments.
Okay. Good point.
So, formative assessments are those ongoing checks for understanding.
Right.
That, inform your teaching and provide continuous feedback to students.
Yes.
Summative assessments are the evaluations at the end of a unit or term
Gotcha.
that demonstrate overall learning.
Okay.
And standardized tests offer a broader snapshot against district or state standards, which can be useful for like evaluating curriculum effectiveness.
Right.
But, remembering that our focus remains on the individual student's growth
Yes.
within that framework.
Okay, that's helpful, that distinction between the different types of assessments.
Yeah.
It provides some context. Now, when it comes to actually discussing, like, grades and scores with parents,
Right.
how do we frame that information constructively? I mean, that can be a really sensitive area, right?
It can be. And I think the key is to always begin by highlighting what the student can do rather than just focusing on the grade itself.
Okay.
So talk about like specific skills they've mastered or concepts they understand. Acknowledge their effort, their participation in class discussions,
Yeah.
and any areas where you've observed significant improvement,
Right.
even if the grade hasn't fully caught up yet.
Okay.
And it's also important to gently draw the connection between family support at home,
Right.
things like creating a consistent study environment or engaging in conversations about schoolwork
Right.
and what's being taught in the classroom.
Yeah.
And whenever possible, visuals can be incredibly powerful tools.
Oh, absolutely.
So, think about using charts to show progress over time.
Yeah.
Rubrics that clearly outline the criteria for different grade levels on assignments.
Right.
Or growth graphs that visually represent a student's development in specific skills.
Yes. Visuals really can make those kind of abstract concepts more concrete.
Oh, exactly.
And less intimidating. So, okay, let's say we've shared all this information, these insights with parents. How do we then encourage them to become active, ongoing partners in their child learning journey?
Well, I think it's all about fostering a genuine two-way dialogue.
Right.
So, actively invite families to ask questions, share any concerns they might have, make it clear that their input is valued.
Yeah.
Provide concrete and practical examples of how they can support learning at home,
Right.
tailored to the student's specific needs and the curriculum.
Okay.
So this could range from, suggesting they engage in conversations about what they learned that day to helping establish consistent homework routines or utilizing online learning resources.
Right, right.
And, as we touched on earlier with the sign-in sheet, maintaining those open lines of communication
Yes.
is vital. Suggesting the use of a family journal or notebook
Okay.
that travels between home and school can be a really simple way to share quick updates, observations,
Yeah.
and even student reflections.
I like that.
And then, of course, regular class updates or newsletters,
Mhm.
whether they're digital or paper-based, can also keep families informed about what's happening in the classroom,
Right.
upcoming topics, and ways they can get involved.
Now, let's face it, not every conversation is going to be smooth sailing.
Right.
How can we as educators navigate those more challenging discussions with sensitivity,
Yeah.
and maintain that collaborative approach?
Yeah, and I think this is where a strategy like the sandwich method can be a helpful framework.
Sandwich method, okay.
So the idea is to start with a positive and genuine comment about the student.
Right.
So perhaps highlighting a strength or a positive contribution they make to the class.
Okay.
Then you address the specific concern or area needing improvement,
Right.
focusing on observable behaviors
Right.
and academic data.
Gotcha.
And then finally, you end with an encouraging note or observation about the student's potential
Okay.
or your collaborative plan moving forward.
Right.
It's also crucial to avoid language that places blame on the student or the family. Instead, use we language,
Right.
like we've noticed or we're working together on, to really foster that sense of shared responsibility
Right.
in addressing the issue.
Yeah.
And always offer opportunities for follow-up conversations, whether it's scheduling a more in-depth conference, setting up a regular phone check-in, or creating a plan for monitoring progress and providing updates.
Right.
And of course, if language is a potential barrier to effective communication,
Yes.
it is absolutely essential to arrange for a qualified translator to be present.
Absolutely. Those are really practical and empathetic tips for kind of navigating those trickier conversations.
Yeah.
So what about once the meeting concludes?
Right?
What are some good follow-up steps that we can take as educators?
Well, I think the follow-up is just as important as the initial meeting
Okay.
in really reinforcing that partnership.
Right.
So sending a brief thank you note or message to the parents for taking the time to meet demonstrates your appreciation for their involvement.
Right.
It's also a great idea to summarize the key points of the discussion in a follow-up email or text message,
Okay.
including any specific action steps or agreed-upon plans that were discussed.
Yeah.
This just helps ensure that everyone's on the same page.
Right.
And finally, for your own record keeping
Right.
and to inform future interactions,
Yeah.
it's always a good practice to keep a brief log of the conversation,
Okay.
noting key takeaways and any follow-up actions.
So to bring it all together, it sounds like effective communication with parents about academic performance,
Right.
like we see in Ms. Kirby's work,
Mm-hmm.
is about creating a welcoming environment, being prepared,
Yes.
having clear, accessible information,
Absolutely.
using positive, understandable language.
Yeah.
That focuses on growth,
Mm-hmm.
really encouraging family involvement as true partners,
Yes.
navigating challenging conversations with empathy
Absolutely.
and a collaborative spirit,
Right.
and then thoughtfully following up.
It's all connected.
Yeah,
Yeah. It's about intentionally building that strong and supportive bridge between school and home.
Exactly.
And by implementing these practical strategies, you as educators can really foster a genuine partnership with families.
Yes.
That ultimately leads to a deeper understanding of each learner and a more supportive and effective environment for their academic success.
And on that note, here's a final thought for you to consider.
Okay.
As you reflect on your current interactions with parents about academics, think about this. How could intentionally incorporating even one or two of these strategies, maybe focusing on creating a more welcoming atmosphere or being more explicit about the purpose of different assessments, how could that positively impact those conversations?
Right.
And more importantly, further benefit your students' overall learning experience?
Yeah.
Thanks for diving deep with us today.
Thank you.
We'll see you next time.